Scott, you've had many individual project successes on the ground in climate displacement sensitive areas, but now you're setting out to create an international standard to protect the rights of displaced people. What prompted you to take on such an ambitious project?
Well, Displacement Solutions has been working on the issue of climate displacement around the world for 5 or 6 years now, really since our establishment in 2006. And through work in countries as diverse as Bangladesh and Kiribati, the Maldives, Tuvalu, Fiji, Solomon Islands, and elsewhere, we found that people who are suffering as a result of climate change and being forced to flee from their traditional homes and lands don't have the protection that they need, either in law or in terms of what governments are doing for them. And that's a systematic problem that we've found throughout all of these countries and elsewhere in the world, in places where climate displacement is already occurring, and certainly where it will occur. Added to that is the clear lack within international human rights and related laws of specific protection geared towards protecting the rights of those who are displaced because of circumstances beyond their control related to environmental causes, including climate change and or natural disasters. And because of that gap in international legal protection and the facts on the ground, as we speak, there are people who are in need of assistance who aren't getting it, we've decided to pool our energies together with a range of people and organizations throughout the world to attempt to put together a new international standard which addresses this current shortcoming in international protection and hopefully acts as the foundation for a whole series of subsequent actions by individual countries, by organizations, and by the international community to ensure that everybody who's displaced because of climate change actually can get a new home for their lost home and a new piece of land for the land that they've lost.
Great. The Displacement Solutions team seems to be always growing. Who have you brought on board to assist you with this new project, and why?
Well, we're lucky at Displacement Solutions to have great relations with a whole range of experts on displacement themes throughout the world. For this particular project, one of the main players is a guy called David Hodgkinson, who's based in Perth in Western Australia, and he's worked for a number of years to also try to achieve the objective of a new international treaty on the rights of climate displaced people. Politically, that treaty idea, as good as it may be, is not currently supported by enough countries to actually have a chance of making it through all the way up to the UN General Assembly. So together with David and others, we are working ourselves on creating a new standard which can generate, hopefully, renewed support for increasingly stronger laws at the international level so that all these people can be protected.
Great. So in such an ambitious project, what do you see as the real challenges of getting this up and running?
I think one of the biggest challenges of all is simply the scale of the problem that we're talking about. If you look at official figures right now, the only real agency responsible for refugees in the world is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, so people who are forced to flee their countries for well-founded fears of persecution. There's only about 12 million people recognized right now by UNHCR as refugees as such, so people in need of international protection. They also, UNHCR and a number of other agencies, look after 37 million internally displaced people. And maybe 40 million by now. So not many more than 50 million people basically right now who are displaced who have some degree of protection afforded to them by international agencies. Problematically, when it comes to climate displacement, the very lowest figures that are bandied about in the world today are 200 to 300 million people who are most likely to be affected. So given the fact that there's no agency in place right now at the international level focusing on this group of people, that not a single government in the world is doing enough to achieve what needs to be achieved when it comes to protecting the rights of climate displaced people, and the fact that science and millions of scientists and those who believe in science around the world are clearly showing that this is a very real problem that's only going to grow. We are lacking on all of those fronts. There's very little money available for addressing this problem. There's very little political will to truly address it, and simply it's potentially large scale automatically sends people running for the exits because they don't know what to do. And our basic line on all of this is, yes, it's a big problem, but you can determine where climate displacement is going to affect the largest number of people. You can determine the neighborhoods, in fact, where it's going to affect people. And you can also begin now to plan for solutions for this displacement. And one of the things that we advocate, one of the projects we're also working on now, is the idea that land should be set aside wherever possible to act in a preemptive manner to be prepared for looming displacement down the road. And if measures are taken now to plan for displacement which comes in 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, governments throughout the world are going to be in a much better position to grapple with the problem domestically and to then, of course, lower the number of people who eventually have to flee their own countries in order to find some new place to reside.
Great. So I guess on a tangible scale, how will an international standard on the rights of climate displaced people make a difference globally? You kind of touched on it earlier, but how will it make a difference?
Well, in the first instance, it's a way to show the world that people who are displaced because of climate change are not simply hapless victims of disaster. They are the holders of human rights. Being a holder of human rights, whether you're from the Solomon Islands or from Chad or from Brazil or from Canada or any country in the world, comes with a whole series of corresponding obligations that governments have freely undertaken to adhere to, and also responsibilities attached to international organizations and others who care for people who are in precarious situations. So first and foremost, having an international standard that clearly expresses the rights of those affected will hopefully change the discussion at the international level in terms of how these particular groups of people are treated. That's the first objective, really, with this new standard. Secondly, the standard is going to outline the types of steps that governments can take today and into the future to ensure that this rights-based approach to climate displacement is adhered to throughout the entire cycle of displacement, so the pre-displacement period, the mid-displacement period, and the solutions period where displacement no longer exists. And ultimately, we hope that a new sort of popularly inspired international standard, and this standard that is being created now will be subject to the inputs from people across the globe to get the most comprehensive and meaningful text that we can. The real hope is that this will act as the beginning, not the end of a process that eventually leads to a treaty which can be signed and ratified by every country on Earth that clearly shows that the world takes climate change generally very seriously, and more specifically that it takes climate displacement seriously as the human rights issue that it is.